I know that some in our audience know the finer points of hockey.
The Chris Johnston Show.
We are your friends.
The biggest stories, bringing you inside the game.
What did you hear?
The Chris Johnston Show.
What is going on?
Here's Chris with your host, Julian McKenzie.
Some congratulations are in order for CJ because over the weekend, he found his way onto the SDPN Discord. Congratulations, buddy. It was good to see you enchanting the fans and engaging them all weekend. What was it like before we get into the Chris Johnston Show today? What was it like interacting with all the fans on the Steve Dangle Podcast Network Discord?
It was cool. I guess for some reason they wanted to know if I like pickles or not. And based on my answer that I do like pickles, that seemed to get people going. So I'm still finding my way on the Discord universe, but it's cool that people are that interested and are hanging out in there. And I'll be back. I'll jump in from time to time and, just say hi and see what's going on.
Yeah, man. A lot of people are very receptive. If you listening at home are interested in seeing what all the fuss is about on Discord, you can go to the SDPN website, click on the Discord link, and you'll add yourself to the Discord. There are like thousands of SDP fans there. Not only are they just fans of the Steve Dangle podcast, they'll be talking about the Chris Johnston Show and Game Over, the brand new show from Andrew Berkshire that premieres this week. We have a jam-packed show for you on this holiday Monday. We have some questions from you all that have been sent out with the Ask CJ hashtag. We'll get to those before the end of the show. We have to start with some news that's kind of come down over the wire earlier today, and that is that Austin Matthews of the Toronto Maple Leafs, he won't be available for at least the first 3 games of the regular season as he continues to recover from that nagging wrist injury. He had surgery for it in the offseason, but he's still just on the mend, just trying to get back into action. If I remember in the offseason, he said he was a bit optimistic about starting for the season opener on Wednesday against against the Montreal Canadiens. I was just curious, was there any snag in that recovery? Is there any reason why he needs a bit more time?
My sense is this isn't maybe any reason to have any great concern. I think all along, as much as Austin publicly had been saying that he wanted to play on opening night, that was a target of his. I think that there was an understanding from both his side of things and the Leafs that this possibility existed, that, it might just get to this stage and he wouldn't feel comfortable enough going into it. And let's face it, this is an 82 game season. He had wrist issues last year. And I think that the priority is on having him as healthy as possible throughout the year. And, if you go back to August, he ramped up his skating when he was in Arizona. He started to feel some discomfort then. That's when the decision was made for him to go through surgery. He was supposed to be in the splint after surgery for 6 weeks. He got that off 1 or 2 days early, but he's still only been shooting pucks for about 2.5 weeks now. And every other NHL player that's been healthy has, been ramping it up in August. They had full camps in September. They're into their 3rd month almost of what you would call normal action with shooting and handling the puck. And so, I think that they're being extra cautious here. I don't think there's any huge alarm bells at this point in time, but, he's been probably one of the fastest starters in the league the last number of years. He's had some big opening nights, of course, but then he's, had a few Octobers where he had 10 goals in 10 games type of thing. And so, the fact that he's going to miss at least 3 games to start and perhaps more, certainly will be a storyline in Toronto.
Oh, absolutely. Especially if it goes beyond those 3 games and it ends up being maybe another week at that. But you do bring up a really excellent point. Like, this is going to be the first time in quite some time we're going to be going through an 82 game season. And considering how the Toronto Maple Leafs look, like if they are without Austin Matthews to start off the year for, let's say it's like 5 games, for example, say he needs 2 more games after the 3. It shouldn't be the end of the world considering what this roster looks like, considering what this division looks like. If we're talking about a whole month or something like that, then it gets a little bit more dicey. But I'm with you on the fact that people should at least kind of calm down. I haven't taken the temperature of Maple Leafs fans when it comes to how they're processing this Austin Matthews injury news, but this shouldn't be that. I don't want to say it's not that big of a deal, but we should calm down on the level of panic when it comes to the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Well, and he missed 5 games, I believe it was last season, and he, won the goal scoring title by 8. So, I think that there's enough proof in the pudding that he'll still have an opportunity to big impact if he's healthy. And, really you want him to be finishing the year on a high. I mean, in a perfect world, of course, he's starting. Sidney Crosby actually had a similar wrist procedure done in September, so later than Austin. He's going to miss at least the first Penguins game and probably the first couple at minimum. I mean, I think the teams are taking the big picture view with their stars, because if you rush it back, if there's any sort of re-aggravation or issue, I mean, then you're into deeper problems than, whether you miss 1 or 2 or 3 games out of the gate.
Really interesting start to the year, considering that Matthews isn't going to be around for the first few games. Crosby's not going to be available. We all know about Carey Price, and we talked about that on the last episode of this show. I know Alexander Ovechkin picked up an injury in the last preseason game. I don't know what his status.
December minimum, maybe January.
Game 2. Like, it's a bit weird to see some of the league's biggest stars out for various different reasons, and also at different lengths as well to start off the year. I can't think of any other year where you've had all this talent. Not to say that there isn't any other talent not available to start off the year, but I can't think of any other year where we've had all these like high profile names not available to start off the season.
Well, look, it's partially coincidence, of course, but it's also a short off season. It's another year where there wasn't as much time between the last game played and the first game played. And so, there is less recovery time, and of getting Malkin's position, he had surgery in June. So he was going to be missing a bunch of time anyway. But, with Matthews and Crosby not really, addressing their issues till later in the summer, that's taken them into the start of the season where they're unavailable. So, I do think it's partially in a long-winded way. It's sort of a COVID issue because the league has had to jam a couple shorter off seasons together. Next year, free agency is meant to be July 13th. The Stanley Cup's meant to be handed out no later than June 30th. So we're getting closer and closer back to what the previous schedule was before COVID turned everything upside down. And so that should give longer off seasons for players to get healed up.
Any other news and notes on Austin Matthews before we go from that to some of the other news and notes we want to get to on this week's episode? Well, today's episode, not this week's episode. Excuse me. I misspoke.
All good. No, I think that pretty much covers it. As I say, it's a situation that bears watching when you're talking about arguably the best pure shooter in the league. The way he comes back, even when he does play, matters. Coming off a wrist surgery. Can he shoot the puck in the same way? I mean, that's obviously his biggest individual weapon when you look at his skill set. And so this will sort of be an evolving storyline, but I do think this isn't a sign that anything bad happened. It's more just it didn't heal up as quickly as they hoped, and they're taking a cautious approach.
Does he get 40 again, this time in a full 82 game season? He got 40 on a bum wrist last year. Maybe he cracks 50 this year.
He's going to get 50. I mean, look, if you look at his last 2 seasons, he basically had 50. When the COVID pause hit, I believe he was at 47 goals with like 13 games left, give or take. So that was going to be a 50 year. It was a prorated 50 year. And then last year was 41 goals in 51 or 52 games. So that was a prorated 60 year. We don't know about health. And obviously, this is a player that's missed some time with various injuries through his career. But, I think if he plays 70 games, he's getting to 50 goals.
That's not a bad tally for anybody, especially if you're Austin Matthews. I want to talk about Jack Eichel as well. I feel like we've all tried to talk about Jack Eichel throughout much of the summer. Is there any new development on whether or not he'll be able to leave Buffalo or get the surgery, or just anything on Jack Eichel? Because it just seems as if it's just been the same status quo for the better part of the last few months.
Well, from a public standpoint, I guess not a lot's changed, but what's happening behind the scenes is changing a little bit. And certainly there's more NHL teams that have been able to get additional medical info on Jack Eichel's situation, to get more comfortable with the possibility of the disc replacement surgery that he'd like to pursue. I mean, look, any team that trades for him is going to have to be comfortable with him going through the procedure that the Sabres doctors don't want him to have. I think that's, kind of self-evident. And, I don't know how this will go down in terms of timing, but I think ideally the trade happens and then he goes through the surgery, with the blessing of that team's doctors. And, there's a component now where the Sabres have acknowledged in their trade talks that they're willing to attach sort of conditions on the picks, depending on how he performs afterwards, how many games he can play, those types of things. And so it's not the ask, I guess, is changing a little bit or shifted a bit from the summer where they were looking for 4 hard premium assets. Now I think that there's an understanding on the Sabres end that any team making this trade is taking on a little bit of risk too, just because there's uncertainty with the player's health. And so, I don't have we don't have a screaming headline to report on the situation, but there are definitely teams involved. I do know of a team that saw that medical info and they weren't comfortable with them doing the disc replacement surgery. At least that was a recommendation from their doctors. There are other teams that are, I think, more comfortable with them doing that. And so, let's hope that this helps bring about a resolution. But, I don't think anything's imminent. But there's certainly been more dialogue between other teams and the Sabres, and then obviously Jack Eichel's camp on what his recovery might look like.
The Sabres themselves, they don't have any type of like internal deadline or timeline on ideally when they try to offload Jack Eichel.
Well, probably yesterday would be the best timeline for them, if being honest. I mean, just because, look, this is a rebuilding organization. He's a premium player, even if it's not quite as good of a return as it could have been in July, potentially. I mean, it's still probably going to, be something that's attractive to them. I think the issue is now that we're into the season, they don't really control the situation entirely, right? I mean, the other teams that might have to give up 2 or 3 or 4 assets in this deal aren't feeling the pressure to do so because they're bringing on a player that, is probably, if once he goes through his disc replacement surgery, going to be potentially 3 months before he can play. I mean, it's hard to say for certain, but certainly not, someone that would be you'd be acquiring with the hope that he's having a major impact on this season. So, I do think that's kind of where it's at. You don't have that deadline. Sometimes you need a deadline, I think, to get a deal across the finish line, whether that's a contract negotiation or a trade. And that's why I still am of the personal belief that it wouldn't surprise me to see this drag on a little bit longer. But, probably the positive development here for me, Julian, is that I think that there's a good working relationship between Jack Eichel's agents, the Sabres, these other teams. I mean, I think that there's an understanding that finding a resolution is best for all the parties involved. And so they continue to work towards that, at this time.
You don't have to go into details as to who might be interested, but I'm just curious about what the interest is like in Jack Eichel compared to what it might have been like in the summer. If you have any in-depth like knowledge on what it was like in the summer when teams were interested in him compared to what we're seeing now.
It's slightly diminished, which isn't a comment on the player. And obviously the player had the same injury in the summer as he has right now. I think it's more because of cap decisions that have been made. You look at a team like the Minnesota Wild, they certainly had interest in Jack Eichel. It's just not a trade that they can consider making at this point in time, not after paying Kaprizov, going through the buyouts as they did for Suter and Parise and some of the other financial decisions they made. They gave Kevin Fiala a new contract. I think that they're just not in a position right now where they could pull the trigger on that move. But, if we could rewind it back to July 10th, they hadn't made all those decisions yet. And so they maybe we're looking to see the fit. The New York Rangers signed Mika Zibanejad to an 8-year extension over the weekend. I think that should all but end the Jack Eichel talk with New York. And so, you have a few teams in those situations. I still keep an eye on a team like the Anaheim Ducks, who I think are kind of laying in the weeds. I don't get the sense that they're out trying to make this trade happen right now. But I think that there are teams certainly with interest here. I think the Calgary Flames are keeping tabs on things. There's a few others, whispers of other teams that are around. And so, there is still interest, but it's not at the level it was in the summer, because in the summer, a lot of teams hadn't made other commitments. Right. And so, the beauty is if this does actually extend into next offseason, which, I recognize is challenging, but then you might open up the door to some new teams that we're not even on our radar right now that aren't too engaged in these discussions. Cause maybe once it gets to next May and the team's had a big first round loss or is looking at maybe allowing some players to walk out the door as unrestricted free agents, maybe they get into this sweepstakes. And so I think the pool of teams interested kind of grows and shrinks based on the circumstances. And right now in season, or just at the start of the season, it's just not as many teams that I think are truly, having this as a front burner issue.
And if the pool of teams increase, say next off season, I mean, just thinking in my mind, that would make sense that the asking price might go up with it, right? That's at least how I would see it.
Well, it depends if there's a bidding war. That's what it comes down to. And, we all know if there's a real deadline here, it's July 1st or July 13th, I guess would be because the shift of free agency. But, July 13th in this case is when, Jack Eichel's no movement clause kicks in. It's not to say you can't make a deal beyond that deadline, but certainly I think it gets more challenging. And obviously the player has some say then in what happens. I think it makes it so that if it gets on the other side of July 13th, maybe the Sabres can't optimize them as a trade asset. And so, the hope is whenever it comes to making this trade is that you have multiple parties bidding and you can pit them against each other. It's no different than, in Toronto here where I live, there's a lot of, sales pressure on houses because, a lot of people are trying to buy houses and you hope that 20 people show up with bids. I think that's how you get the most out of them. But, the market will give up at what it will at a certain time. And I'm certain right now, if this trade was completed next week, it would be for less than we would have expected last summer. But that doesn't mean they've lost it entirely because there's certainly a universe, I suppose, where this goes forward and you get more teams in the mix and are pushing for them. But, let's hope, I think I've said this before, but that Jack Eichel can get the treatment he needs because, it doesn't sound like a very pleasant injury. And I know he's been in some discomfort.
I want to piggyback off a question that was asked in your Inside the NHL column, which can be read in the Toronto Star. And again, we will get to questions that CJ could not even get to for that column because it was
flooded, man.
Dude, it was insane. I was looking at your mentions. I was like, wow, like there are so many people who took advantage of that hashtag. And yeah, man, keep those coming.
I was like the guy who forgot his homework because this is the first one I've done.
Yeah.
I had to file that to my editors on Sunday afternoon or early evening. And I was like, it was Saturday. And I was like, oh man, I forgot to ask for questions because we discussed having a section where, I take reader questions every week. So, you're throwing it out there Saturday of a long weekend, nice weather. Didn't know what I'd get, but man, there was a lot of response and that's awesome. I hope everyone keeps it coming. I'm going to certainly do it regularly in the column that I'm writing that's running in the Toronto Star. And then, obviously we'll take some spillover here if there continues to be that level of interest because, we want to connect with the people that, what they want to, not just what we think is important.
Definitely. And I can say this, not only did we get questions on Twitter, we got questions on Discord as well. But again, we'll get to those before the end of this episode. The one question I wanted...
Discord question is, yes, I like pickles.
Well, there you go. The question I wanted to piggyback off from the column pertains to Jack Eichel and that artificial disc surgery. And I forget the name of the person who sent it. My apologies to them. But what's stopping Jack Eichel from just saying, you know what? I know this surgery is good for me. Let me just get it and just be done with it. What's stopping him from just defying the Sabres?
Well, in short, he could be in breach of his contract for doing so. There's two things that apply here. First is the collective bargaining agreement that the NHL has reached with the players is quite clear on the matter that teams have the final say on these types of treatments. And so that would be him acting beyond his team, of course, if he just went and got the surgery he prefers when their doctors aren't recommending it. The second part is every contract a player signs is actually called a standard player contract or SPC. And so the clauses in those deals are all the same. What's different, of course, is if they're signing bonuses or what you're paid versus what I'm paid. But there are standard clauses. And in paragraphs 4 and 5 of the standard player contract, it makes it quite clear that if a player does something like that and is unable to perform his services, I believe it's called, or duties of his job, he could be found in breach. So in that case, the Sabres could elect to suspend him without pay. They could potentially even terminate his contract. That might lead to some kind of a grievance that the PA has. But, I think it's pretty clear that it would be a difficult case for him to win, that he had the right to do that, especially if he were to get that surgery and not come out of it able to play hockey. And right now he's still being paid. And so, it's really just about protecting himself financially, because when a player is injured in the NHL, he gets paid, which is a great part of the system because, this is a very difficult sport. Players do get injured. And in Jack Eichel's case, he's got $50 million left and 5 years on his deal. That's a lot of money to jeopardize, even as tempting as it might be to just want to go and get the procedure he wants done.
Yeah, he's pretty much just kind of stuck in Buffalo until Buffalo says, all right, you can get the surgery, or they just offload him to someone else who will be willing to take on that risk. It's not the easiest situation in the world, but I guess $50 million can at least help alleviate some pain. Maybe, sort of. I'm not sure. I'm never going to touch 50 million over my life. I don't know. You know what? I shouldn't say that. Who knows?
I was going to say,
maybe
not with that attitude, you won't.
That's very fair. What if we both win the lottery and we win like 100 million, we split it? Like, that's very fair. That's something that could happen. I shouldn't put that in existence. Hey, it's Julian here. Just want to let you all know about something pretty cool from officepools.com. They've got a hockey pool running where if you participate, you might put yourself in a position where you could win some pretty cool prizes. OfficePools.com, just in case you haven't ever heard of them, was launched in 1995. They were the first website that allowed people to manage a hockey pool online instead of waiting for the scores to be posted on the bulletin board or fridge the very next day. And now they serve hundreds of thousands of users and are the premier fantasy hockey site in Canada. Whether you want to create a box pool, which is pretty easy to set up, or great for fundraising, or if you have a lot of people who want to participate, an open pool or a draft pool, Office Pools has the perfect format for your hockey pool needs. So if you go to officepools.com, join the Athletic Hockey Pool, which is powered by all of the Athletic hockey shows, and they're giving you a chance to participate and have a chance at winning some pretty cool prizes. You could win potentially some signed jerseys from some players like Sidney Crosby. John Tavares is also in that list as well. You could also have a chance at winning a PS5 as well as an Xbox Series X. There's a lot of cool prizes I haven't even mentioned. So go to officepools.com, join the Athletic Hockey Pool, and sign up and make your picks to give yourself a chance at winning some fantastic prizes. It's September, which means football season is back. And for many of us, there's no better way to celebrate and enjoy the games than by having some skin in the game, which is why BetMGM remains the exclusive betting partner of The Athletic. And as a fan of The Athletic, you can bet $10 to win $150 plus a free 3-month subscription or extension to your subscription with The Athletic when you bet with BetMGM using our promo code. Just sign up at betmgm.com and use the promo code TheAthleticPod at checkout to take advantage of this special offer from the king of sportsbooks. That's bet $10 to win $150 plus 3 months free from The Athletic at betmgm.com using the promo code TheAthleticPod. And The Athletic Pod is all in one word at checkout. New customer offer. Visit betmgm.com for terms and conditions.
21 years of age or older to wager. Arizona, Colorado, Washington, D.C., Indiana, Iowa, Michigan, New Jersey, Nevada, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, Virginia, and West Virginia only. Excludes Michigan disassociated persons. Please gamble responsibly. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP in Arizona, 1-800-522-4700 in Colorado, Washington, D.C., Nevada, Wyoming, and Virginia, 1-800-270-7117 for confidential help in Michigan, 1-800-GAMBLER in Maryland, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and West Virginia, 1-800-BETS-OFF in Iowa. Call or text the Tennessee Red Line 800-889-9789 in Tennessee, or call 1-800-9-WITH-IT in Indiana.
What's up, people? It's Julian from The Athletic telling you to subscribe to The Athletic. TheAthletic.com/hockeypod is an easy way for you to subscribe to The Athletic. I've got a really cool story up there right now on the use of songs in the EA Sports NHL franchise. Got to talk to some bands like Sum 41, Gob, Billy Talent is in this article as well. Papa Roach is in there. I got to ask them a question about how they've gotten all these different songs throughout these different games in the EA Sports NHL franchise, but arguably their most popular song, Last Resort, nowhere to be found. The only place you can read that article is up at The Athletic. We have a deal going on right now. If you subscribe, 50% off the annual price. So you should go do that. TheAthletic.com/hockeypod. One other thing I want to put into existence is talk about Brady Kucherov, because as we approach the start of the National Hockey League season, he still is not with a new contract. It's strange. I feel like almost every single episode we've done, if not every single episode, the majority of them, we've touched off on these negotiations. What can you tell us about what's going on now?
Well, let's keep it short because this is a very fluid situation at this stage. But, you know, as of when we're recording late Monday afternoon, it doesn't seem as though there's been any type of breakthrough or movement in the negotiations. You know, I do think that literally could change at this stage with one phone call. I mean, both sides know Ottawa's first game is Thursday night. In a perfect world, you're completing this contract probably long before now, but you're completing it in time to get Brady Kucherov to at least have a chance to play on opening night and be with this team for the start of the season. You know, what I'll be very interested in is if they get to Thursday and there's no deal, because this is a real deadline. I mean, as of, you know, even basically Tuesday, Wednesday, I mean, he's missing money that he'll never get back, you know, by not being under contract during the season. You know, the listeners might not realize, but players only get paid during the regular season. So this year it's actually a 200-day regular season, but basically every day, if you look at it of the year, a player is earning, a 200th of his paycheck, of his total salary for that year. And, day one, starts this week. So if Brady Kucherov misses day one and day two and day three, he won't be paid for those days. And so, yeah, I could see both sides digging in at that point. I think it gets to really dangerous territory if he starts missing games, because I do think that it's harder to see a resolution then. But, there's still time to work this out and get him back and even play in game one. And so I'll leave it at that, because anything I say will quickly be dated.
Yes, that's entirely possible. I'm still of the belief that Brady Kucherov will sign before the regular season starts. But if it gets to a point where he starts missing regular season games, that could get very dicey. And with that,
then December 1st is your next deadline, right? December 1st is the day a player has to sign to play in that season. And so, yeah, it's risky if it gets beyond game one of the regular season for the Senators.
Yeah, and I mean nope, as in like you do not want, if you're an Ottawa Senators fan, you do not want it to get to that point. I believe we have cleared all of the NHL news that we want to talk about for today's episode. And with that, we can get to some of these reader questions that have come through Twitter and on Discord. You ready? Again, I did not show any of these questions to CJ. He willingly wanted to be surprised at the questions that were coming in. I admire the fact that you want to be surprised for this. Like I admire that fact, because I feel like I would have wanted to at least get a gander of what I'm going into.
Well, if I don't know something, I'll let you know. I won't make it up. But, you don't want it to be rehearsed. It's almost, we want to imagine our listeners like they're part of a live show here, and they're the ones tossing it at me. You're just their conduit reading it to me.
All right. Let's start with a question from Discord. Boop Master Ben. How do you see the Central playing out? I know CJ predicted Colorado to win the division, but at least one good team will miss the playoffs from that division. The Metro will probably be that way too.
Yeah, I mean, the Central to me is the strongest division in the league, entering the season. We could be surprised, but as I look at the sort of preseason power rankings, having a Colorado in there, having a Minnesota team that's on the rise, I think Winnipeg actually is a team to me that isn't getting much attention, but wouldn't surprise me at all to see them have a strong season. I like some of the moves they made to strengthen their blue line. And, they already had a strong forward group and a goaltender in Connor Hellebuck that's, can be the best in the world when he's at his best, or certainly within the top 2 or 3 in that conversation. And so, yeah, I think it's going to be a very competitive division. Whereas, I look at the Metro that the reader's pointing out, there's good teams there, but I see nothing but question marks, like Pittsburgh has made the playoffs for 15 straight years. This might be the end of that run. Washington,
me too. I see that.
Washington's getting older, kind of just petered out last season, late in the year. Like, I don't know what they've got. The Rangers, I think we're all expecting to be a little bit better, but, there's still question marks there. I mean, the Islanders are probably, based on making the conference final in consecutive years, that they're going to be, I'm confident a playoff team, and certainly a good team in that division. I like Carolina. Philadelphia, I don't know what to expect. I mean, last year was such an off year, but they traded a lot of bodies out of town to try to shake up the mix there. So I agree that a good team will miss the playoffs in each of those divisions, but in the Metro, I just don't know who the good teams are 100%. I think that this could be a year certainly where teams like Pittsburgh might go from being a very good team to maybe just an average team. Although you would have lost a lot of money over the years making that prediction. So we'll let it play out, because they have had such an amazing run, but they've just got an aging core and not a lot of cap flexibility, and they're dealing with injuries. And, it does seem like they're on the wrong side of it right now. And so, this is going to be a really fascinating season on a number of fronts, but, I expect Colorado to win the division and the cup, mostly just because I think they're probably as motivated as anyone to get over the hump and also have the talent to sort of match the motivation and urgency that their group will be feeling.
Over the weekend, I did an exercise for myself, and I went through every division, and I said, okay, how do I see them all lining up? Here's how I have the Central. Colorado number 1, Winnipeg number 2, Minnesota number 3, Chicago at 4, and then Dallas, St. Louis, Nashville, and Arizona.
I think you might be sleeping on the Blues a little bit there.
That's fair. But also on the Steve Dangle podcast, they also were very down on the Blues this year.
I'm not ready to write the Blues off yet. Like I would have the Blues above Chicago for sure. But that's, I mean, look, it speaks to the question here. I'm not sure how much consistency we'd find if you pulled a bunch of hockey fans or media people or whatever, like us, Julian, on that listing. Dallas is interesting too. Like last year, I know it was a total disaster. They dealt with COVID right out of the gate. They had like 17 cases at the start of the season. They had power outages that delayed games. They had a really crappy schedule.
Yeah, snowstorm.
Yeah, my point is, I'm willing to say that last season might be an aberration just because of some of the things they had to deal with, and I could see them getting back to being a very difficult team to play against too. And so, what a great division it'll be, though. It should be fun to watch all those teams go against each other. And then, of course, you got to come through to the first two rounds of them just to get to the conference final. That's going to be a tough path for Colorado to have to traverse if they're going to make good on my Stanley Cup pick.
You know what's actually going to be really good about that division and pretty much every other single division in the National Hockey League this year? The teams in our respective markets will have games against them, and we won't be stuck going through a whole year where we're only seeing Canadian teams. Thank the Lord I don't have to watch Montreal, Toronto 20 times this year like what we got last year.
It was a lot. It was a lot for every team. It's funny. I was at the player media tour with Jason Dickinson, who's now a member of the Vancouver Canucks, but last year he was in Dallas, and he said he felt like every other game they were playing Chicago. He just said, like, for whatever reason, it just felt like, and he said, like, they got rid of their games with Nashville early in the year, and then they just didn't see them again. Like, it was a strange season in every division for that reason. Obviously brought on by the circumstances. I wouldn't mind if they found a way to get more of an imbalance so that you have more games in division. But there is something special about every team going to every building each year because, I can tell you you're going to want to see the Seattle Kraken play your team. If you're a fan this year, you're going to want to see, hopefully Sidney Crosby's back sooner than later. You're going to want to see him come to your building. You're obviously Connor McDavid, they get to see him a lot in the Western part of the country and the continent. But, if you're a Devils fan, you want to see that game. So, I like getting back to what was gone on before because I do think it's better for the league to have everyone in every building every year.
Yeah, absolutely. The list can go on as well. Nathan McKinnon and his merry men in Colorado. I can't wait to see a game between them and the Canadiens this year, just to be at the Bell Center. I don't know if they have that on the schedule. I would imagine they might. Maybe they don't. But I would like to just watch those two teams play against each other. The list could go on with that. Let me go to the next question. Another one from Discord. This one is from George. This one's a little bit more fun. If you guys could have one current NHL player join your podcast full time as a third contributor, who and why?
Wow.
That's a really good question.
Because you got to first decide what you want from the player, essentially.
Yeah.
Do we want to have a funny man? Do we want to have, like a guy that I've always really appreciated, for example, is Jason Spezza. He's just a great gregarious guy at the media, but he probably watches about as much hockey as even any hockey player does. He's the sort of guy who can tell you, he can really break down other players and just his experience. So do you want that guy or do you want someone, a younger star for the glitz of it? I don't know. Where are you leaning there, Julian?
Like PK Subban comes to mind because of the flash, the name, the way he's been on his own podcast and other media properties as well. It'd be cool if we got it doesn't necessarily have to be a young guy for me. It could easily just be like an older guy near the end of his career who's just seen so much. One guy who I liked, I don't know if he's still active in the NHL anymore, but when he was on NBC, he was really good. Corey Schneider. I thought he provided a lot of interesting perspective when he was doing his, I forget one year he was with the NBC team during the postseason, but I thought he was really good.
Yeah, Corey's a smart guy. Did a lot of work with the NHLPA. Do you know who I've got my pick? It's going to be Drew Doughty. And
really?
Why?
Okay, I want to know why.
He's got zero shits given to start. So
clearly
he is unafraid to tell it like it is. I find I'm largely entertained whenever I see him speaking into a microphone. And what he would give us that we don't have right now is a West Coast presence. And I know it really sticks in Drew's, craw that he doesn't think enough of us Easterners are watching what's happening in those West Coast games. So he could give us a little bit of the perspective from the other side of the continent. And I think he would be a lot of fun to team up with.
And depending on what he might say, too, if it rubs some other team the wrong way, they might use it as bulletin board material when they go on their playoff run. I forget which team did that, but there was at least one team that did that with. Yes, that's the team. The Vegas Golden Knights did that with Drew Dowdy. Next question from Fled, Ed, and Eddie. I'm telling you, we got a lot of Discord questions here. For CJ, how do you square the life of an insider with taking some time for yourself? With hockey breaking news being possible all hours of the day, every day, it seems like you would be perpetually on call.
I don't square it very well, if I'm being honest. I mean, I'm coming at you right now from Thanksgiving dinner. I'm upstairs in the spare bedroom at my in-laws' house. So, and my family's downstairs and we're recording this. And this is just typical. It's not to call out this podcast. I think anyone who wants to do something well has to make some sacrifices. One of them for me is time, just free time, I guess. I don't really have a lot of free time. I'm working on weekends. We're working at nights when games are happening or when we're in studio. But the beauty is it doesn't feel like work. And so that's why the summer is so important. And as much as I know it becomes a bit of a meme on the social medias when you see some of the insiders saying, oh, I'm going to the cottage or whatever, I do think that time is important because when you're on 24/7, and honestly, that's one thing that made the pandemic hard is we didn't really get a break. We went almost for like 2 straight years there because there just wasn't time off. And when the pandemic initially hit, we were still reporting on what the league's plans were. And then, we rolled into the summer bubble and we had the draft last year in October and free agency. And then season's going again and start of January. You won't hear me complain about it, but since you've asked about it, the truth is there's just not a lot of free time. You need to have a lot of understanding from the people you care about in order to make that work. And, personally, I like it because it doesn't feel like I'm working, but I do recognize it's an unusual work setup. Although, I've got to think in other industries, Julian, I don't know about your buddies, like where they're working, but, I think with everyone working from home now so often, like I do think that the borders of work have changed a little bit. And so maybe more what we might call day-to-day jobs are taking on the look of what mine is, but I don't get too far without this phone here. Basically, it's attached to my hip.
Is that an Android phone?
It is, bud. I got a Google Pixel.
Android gang, let's go. Sir. I'm tired of this Android phone slander from whoever wants to say on the Steve Dangle podcast. Who cares? We have Androids. They work.
Yes, and I'm always like the one annoying guy in the group chats that doesn't have the iPhone. So I'm gonna just stick to that.
I'm good with that. And let me tell you one big reason why I have no problem being an Android guy and the guy who spoils the iPhone group chats being the green bubble. When you go out in winters and it gets to -20, I don't want to have to worry about my phone dying because it can't handle the cold, unlike an iPhone, which was built in California and isn't ready to deal with these Quebec winters. So good luck with your iPhone dying on you at like -50.
I also felt good because I did have iPhones back in the day, and I felt like I was being held hostage by the whole cloud situation and everything. And it felt good to break free from that. And man, there's some darn good Android phones. So I'm sticking with the Android for the foreseeable future.
Absolutely. I want everyone listening to free yourself from the fact that it's only iPhone or nothing, and also subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcasts. We
might have just alienated a huge chunk of our audience with that one.
Okay. Well, I mean, they're still going to come back. I don't think it was that bad. Famous last words. Paul Campbell on Twitter, way to go, Paul, talks a lot about goaltending. Has this question for you. Could you review any special roster provisions for COVID this season? Doing it for both vaccinated and unvaccinated players would be very useful. Thanks. #AskCJ.
Sorry, Paul, because I didn't do my research on this one. And so I don't have a complete answer. I do know that in the CBA or in the transition rules that were agreed upon just a week or two ago, there is contemplated in there the possibility they'll bring back taxi squads if needed. As the season's starting right now, in fact, we're basically talking, Julian, when teams have to file their cap compliant opening day roster. It's like the old days, 23 person maximum roster, $81.5 million salary cap. Basically all the old rules apply. There's no special provisions, but I think if the COVID situation, if the league's dealing with outbreaks, you could see a return to taxi squads, which the NHL used last year. which were players that didn't count against the cap, travel with the team. So that's a possibility. When it comes to vaccinated versus unvaccinated players, I should have reviewed this document because I saw his question in my queue and I just meant to look it all up. But, I know, for example, unvaccinated players can't go out on the road, can't be around teammates, have to wear a mask everywhere, have to do their interviews even in a mask. So it's one reason you'll always know who is unvaccinated is if they're talking to reporters with a mask on. It's a tell. And if those players miss time due to COVID, unvaccinated, I believe they can be suspended without pay, meaning if you have a COVID-related absence, or if you can't travel into Canada, like Tyler Bertuzzi, for example, who's spoken to reporters in Detroit about his choice not to be vaccinated. There's 9 games as of now, unless he changes his position on that, where he can't come into Canada and play road games because of the quarantine rules that the government has in place. So, he won't be paid for those days, is my understanding. But, I don't have a total view of that answer because I didn't dive into the notes, but I'll look it up and be sure to be fresh on that in the future.
Oh, I will tell you what, though, for someone who says that they weren't well researched on it, I think you still gave a pretty good answer. I think the taxi squad thing, I didn't realize that they were going to continue doing that. And I think that's a pretty big deal.
Only if they need it. So yeah, we're not starting with a taxi squad, but it's written in the rules that basically the players in the league acknowledge that it might be required at some point. And so that could be something that exists. And, I think that was good for a lot of players. I mean, I'm sure it was a long season for guys who didn't get to play much, but you do get to be up with the team and to skate with them. You're getting the NHL per diem, you're around the group. And, obviously some of those players did find themselves into games. But as it is right now, those players that run taxi squads are in the American Hockey League right now, riding the buses again.
Next question. I'm actually intrigued for your perspective on this because I've been asked this a lot and I don't have any intel and I just think it's a weird situation. So I'm actually very curious about yours. This is from Cheering the Logo on Twitter. 3 times nominated for GM of the Year in 9 years, bringing his team to the Stanley Cup Finals a few months ago. Hard to imagine that salary is the sticky point for Jeff Molson to bring back Marc Bergevin. What's really going on there? Backlash from the Mailloux selection? What do you think?
I think it's salary, frankly, and probably term of that contract. I mean, it's sort of like any deal that isn't done. It's figuring out what the numbers are. I think that's really what's holding it up. It's my belief that Marc Bergevin would be willing to stay for a period of time, but he's been there a long time. I think it's about a decade, if I'm not mistaken, Julian. So,
yeah, since 2012.
I'm not sure he's in a position where you'd see him signing a 5 or 6 year extension. I could see him wanting to opt for something a little shorter, obviously get a raise given some of the credentials that you mentioned in the question. And, they haven't been able to do that. And let's face it, he's in a completely unique situation because, he's coaching a team where, the French language he's the GM of a team in which the French language issue is an issue. I've talked to some people in Montreal I know that think the GM shouldn't have to speak French because, GM, unlike a coach, isn't speaking to reporters really all that regularly as it is, but certainly not every day. I don't know how the fan base feels about that, but the organization clearly has largely opted for French-speaking general managers. And so there's not a huge pool of qualified people, especially with Julien Brisebois getting his extension done in Tampa, that you would say if Marc Bergevin left Montreal, who would be the next GM? I don't think there's an obvious answer. It's not to say there are no candidates, but there's probably not a huge pool there. And so it's a unique negotiation because Mark, of course, would understand that. Jeff Molson would understand that. And so to get him signed, you might have to pay a bit of a premium, not only for his accomplishments, but also because of, the way he fits into that job. And so, it's too soon to say he's definitely gone. I think it points to him leaving after the season, but, that's still 250 days from now. Let's let this play out a little bit more. I'm not 100% convinced he's out the door. I don't think he'll be there long term just because it's a really demanding job to do it in a city like Montreal because of the 2 languages, because of the intense focus on the team. And so, I think there's room for a short-term deal to get sorted out. It just didn't materialize before the season, and they've decided to put it off until the off season.
I think that being a general manager of the Montreal Canadiens is the hardest job you could have of all 32 teams in the National Hockey League. I understand the media pressure that comes to anyone in Toronto. If you have that job as GM, considering their position in sports and what have you, but in Montreal, you have to deal with the Anglo and the Francophone media and that intense pressure on you, being in a market where it's not so much that it's a sports market. It's clearly the Canadians, and then everything else just kind of falls by the wayside. So I also can understand why some media members might feel that a general manager in the city might also have to be French speaking. I don't necessarily think it has to be, but I think if I were to hear out from some other media members, I'm not going to act as if I know every single one that agree on that point or not, but I would be willing to hear them out on why that person would have to be French speaking. But it is interesting that the issue of salary keeps coming up, because I would think that after the run that he had, if the Canadiens wanted to keep him, I didn't think it would be that big of an issue, unless for some reason, and this is just me talking here, what if Marc Bergevin wanted more money than what Julien Brisebois is getting out in Tampa Bay? And this is a guy who's just coming off back-to-back Stanley Cup championships. And if it wasn't for him extending with the Tampa Bay Lightning, Jeff Molson should be making his way down to Tampa trying to get him.
Right. And I don't know if it has to be more money, but I think it's got to be something in that vicinity. Julian, believe, got somewhere around $4.5 million on his extension. And so, again, it doesn't have to be that exact dollar figure, I don't think. But, look, Marc Bergevin would like a raise. I think everyone has the right to ask for that. And let's not totally divorce ourselves from the wider situation going on here. This has not been a time when NHL franchises have been collecting much money. And
nope.
We saw the Canadiens playing a Stanley Cup final with a building that was 10% full or whatever it was. They missed out on a revenue opportunity there because of COVID. And so, it's a tough time to be giving anybody a raise when the cash flow hasn't been where you'd like it to be in the past. And so, I'm not saying they can't afford it, but I think it's a little tougher financial decision given some of the uncertainty over this coming year. Obviously in Canada, the buildings are starting full, but, I think there's an understanding if there's COVID outbreaks or something that might not last all year long. And so there's a lot of different dynamics at the table here, but I do think a lot of them revolve around the financial piece.
Absolutely. Next question here from World Hockey RPT on Twitter. And if you like Bitcoin, you're going to love this question. Why is Ethereum better than Bitcoin?
It's not.
It's pretty straightforward.
I'm not even going to entertain that. I mean, he's inferring an answer that I just don't agree with. I think Bitcoin is the best base level asset in the world right now. I think it's everyone listening to this podcast should be finding a way to acquire some and hold some and watch as our lives get shifted around. I'll tell you this much. I can't name names yet because I haven't asked for privilege, but there's definitely some NHL players that are big Bitcoiners. There's at least one NHL head coach that's looking to get paid in Bitcoin.
What?
Yeah. There's guys in the NFL, Russell Otang, that are getting paid in Bitcoin. I believe Saquon Barkley is getting some of his salary in Bitcoin. We're going to see a massive paradigm shift. And I actually believe sports will be part of it because athletes in particular have a unique problem. They make a lot of money for a period of their life, but it's a small period of their life generally that, they don't have extended long careers. And Bitcoin is the best way to protect against inflation in the world. And, I think we're going to see more and more of this. And, at some point I want to jump in and write a hockey and Bitcoin story, once some of these individuals are willing to talk publicly and not just privately about that particular asset.
Maybe when we get off this call, you should tell me about how does one acquire some of this here Bitcoin. Anyway,
we should be selling sponsorships in it. I'll tell you that much. Give us a call. Give our people a call.
Holla at us.
I don't want to sell like sugary water or something that's going to make you fat. I want to sell something that's going to change your life.
Yeah, you're not interested in doing any of these Manscaped ads?
I'm leaving those to you. Although they did send me some product.
Oh, okay. All right.
I haven't tested it out. I don't know if that's too personal to say, but I did get the welcome pack. I got a shirt and some of the various product that company's offering.
Holla at us, Manscaped. Anyway, last question from Bogues. It's spelled Beugs. It could be Bugs. It could be Bogues. It could be Bugs. I don't know. How much success do you think the Toronto Maple Leafs need to have this season in order to consider it a win?
They got to win a playoff round. I know it's an obvious answer, but it matters. Like it's time to have that happen, or I do think that there will be change brought to them. I'm not saying Kyle Dubas or even Brendan Shanahan necessarily share that opinion. I think that they would argue, process over results at times. And if they have it another season, let's say they win the Atlantic Division and they play a great series and somehow lose again. Like I get that they might still believe in the program, but the pressure from ownership and from the fans would be tremendous, I think, for some degree of change there. And so I think to ease some of the pressure and also just to, remove the doubts, they got to win a playoff round. I mean, anyone who watched the All or Nothing series, like to me, of that whole 4 hours, one of the most interesting things was Paul McLean, who last year was like a veteran coaching consultant with their coaching group between game 6 and 7, is in a coach's meeting, that's not to the public. And he's like, these guys have fucking demons. They're under their fucking cars. They're in their fucking beds, fucking demons, fuck. Like it was, sorry for the F-bombs. Maybe Jesse could. But it was just like I only repeat them because it just showed that how much he really believed it. How much that the view from inside the room was that they had to sort of slay some mental demons, and they obviously were unable to do so. I think to move forward, they have to at least do that. And realistically, they're a team that I still think should be aiming to try to win a Stanley Cup this year. Like if things break their way, I don't think it's impossible, but until they win one round, I mean, let's not even go there.
Yeah. One thing about the Leafs, just to follow up on that, I was surprised that Sheldon Keefe got that extension that he did in the offseason, because I would have thought that this year is the all or nothing scenario. The Leafs have to do well or everyone moves out. But the extension, to me, even though it is short, I think it's only like 2 years.
2 years, yeah.
Like that kind of tells me that, like, okay, even if everything kind of goes to shit in Toronto, Sheldon Keefe might be able to still keep his job. Do you still see it that way, or how do you view it?
I think so. They just didn't want that to be a story. They're looking to remove any distraction ahead of time that they can. I mean, there's still going to be distractions. It's pro sports. Morgan Riley's in a contract year. That's going to keep getting brought up at various points. I mean, you can't eliminate every distraction, but I think that was an easy one to address. And, if you look at the Leafs under Sheldon Keefe, two things stand out to me. I don't have his record in front of me, but I know he was the fastest coach in franchise history he had the most number of wins for his first 100 games coaching a team of anybody in history, 100-year-old franchise. And they've made sizable gains in the defensive side of the puck since he took over. Last year, the Leafs were sixth best in the league at preventing shots against. And if you go back to even 3-4 years prior to that, when they were a playoff team and they were getting 100 points, I mean, it was a lot more risky the way they were doing it. They were like 29th in the league at allowing shots against and chances against. And so, I think that they've shown great growth under the coach. Again, I'm not making apologies for, the playoffs going as they did, but, I think that this is a coach that will probably be safe unless it's a total disaster. And who knows? I mean, that's why we get to watch these games and see how things go. But if they have a good regular season, I still think he's keeping his job unless there's some dereliction of duty in the playoffs. But, we're talking about a guy that's done nothing but win everywhere he's been. And so I think that they were comfortable with that extension because it removes the question. And I just think that they think he's the best guy for the job right now.
And that's going to do it for all these questions that we had for you. I think we're going to be doing the Ask CJ segment a lot more often, at least every Monday, because that's going to be in line with your Inside the NHL column, which can be read on the Toronto Star.
New rule, though. No more Ethereum questions. Like next time you see Ethereum, like I don't even want to entertain it.
Okay.
Bitcoin's a protocol and Ethereum's an application. Like Bitcoin is the base layer thing. It's what I mean. I'm not saying anyone out there can make their own investment decisions, but to even infer that one is better than the other, the questioner there had it backwards.
We had questions asking for predictions. We had questions about Marc Bergevin. We had questions about roster provisions for COVID. But the question that really flusters CJ is about Ethereum. I don't even know what that is, but
I'm going to be eating Thanksgiving dinner in like 20 minutes, and that question will still be rattling through my brain.
I hope your in-laws have Bitcoin as well. And I guess that goes for everyone listening to this podcast. Another episode of the CJ Show in the books. We will be back on Thursday, their second podcast of the week. We're coming at you Mondays and Thursdays. Subscribe to the podcast wherever you get podcasts. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, the SDPN YouTube channel. And yeah, just keep consuming our content. We may or may not have an update on merch. And I'm just going to leave it there because we may or may not have an update coming on merch for the CJ Show. I'm just going to be a little bit vague about that. For CJ, I'm Julian saying so long. Hopefully you enjoyed your weekend of thanks, and we'll be back on Thursday. Peace.
Thankful for you, pal.
I'm thankful for you too, and everyone else at the Steve Dangle Podcast Network.
The Chris Johnston Show. Inside the game, twice a week. Follow Chris on Twitter @ReporterChris. And follow Julian McKenzie @JK McKenzie.